The night Sloane Beckett walked onto the ice of a sold-out NHL arena 7 months pregnant and looked Caden Wolfe dead in the eyes, every camera in the building found her. 40,000 people went silent. Not the polite silence of a timeout or a referee's whistle. The other kind. The held breath kind. The kind that meant everyone in that arena understood, without a single word being spoken, that whatever was happening in the center of that ice had nothing to do with hockey. The Winnipeg Arrows were 40 seconds from the end of Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Tied series. Everything on the line. And Caden Wolfe, the man whose wrist shot had carried this franchise for 3 years, was standing at center ice with his stick in his gloved hand, staring at a woman he had tried, and catastrophically failed, to stop loving, while her brother stood 20 feet behind her looking like a man deciding whether to intervene or let the ice crack on its own. The broadcast cut to him. Then to her. Then to the scoreboard. Then back to her. Twitter detonated. But none of that mattered. Because Sloane's eyes were wet and she had her hand pressed flat against her stomach and she was saying something. Just to him, just 3 words, and he couldn't hear her over 40,000 people, but he knew exactly what she said. It's happening now. 6 months earlier. He was supposed to walk away. That was the deal he had made with himself approximately 47 times over 2 years. Every time Sloane Beckett walked into a room, every time she laughed that too loud laugh that made people turn around, every time she leveled him with that direct, measuring look that cut through every layer of performance he'd constructed since junior league. Walk away, Wolfe. She's Riker's sister. She's off limits. She's the one grenade you do not pull the pin on. But the night the Winnipeg Arrows won the Western Conference Championship, with champagne soaking through his jersey and the entire city screaming outside the arena walls, Sloane appeared at the end of the celebration corridor in a burgundy jacket with her auburn hair falling over one shoulder, and every deal he'd made with himself dissolved like ice under a heat lamp. She was nothing like the women who lingered around the arena after games. There was no performance in her, no calculated positioning. She stood slightly apart from the noise the way she always did, present but not consumed by it, watching him with those gray-green eyes that had absolutely no business being that color, and the entire locker room celebration became background noise. "Nice game, Wolfe," she said when he reached her. 2 years of restraint. 1 sentence. Complete destruction. "You drove 4 hours from Calgary for a Western Conference game," he said. "I drove 4 hours because Riker asked me to." She tilted her head slightly. "Don't flatter yourself." The corner of her mouth gave her away. It always did. Sloane Beckett could keep her voice perfectly flat and her expression perfectly composed, but that mouth, that slight, traitorous curve at the left corner, told a completely different story. They ended up at Altitude, a rooftop bar in downtown Winnipeg with floor-to-ceiling glass and the city spread out below them like a busted constellation. Not planned. Or at least that's what they agreed to tell themselves later, in the brief window before later became complicated. Riker had disappeared with the GM and a bottle of 18-year-old scotch. The rest of the team splintered into the night. It was just Caden, Sloane, 2 glasses of something amber, and the specific silence of 2 people who had been pretending not to notice each other for a very long time finally running out of pretend. She was wearing the burgundy jacket open now over a gray-fitted top, and her hair was loose, and she was telling him that Brock Hendricks, their starting right-winger, 6'3", 215 pounds of professional menace, had no left edge, and doing it with the calm authority of someone who had been studying hockey biomechanics professionally for 4 years and personally for her entire life. "He telegraphs every cut left," she said, tracing a small arc on the bar top with one finger. "His right shoulder drops 2 seconds before he commits. I've been watching it for 3 seasons. Every defenseman in this league should know that by now." "Have you told Riker?" "Riker tells me I overthink things." "Riker overthinks things and calls it strategy. You're just better at it than him." She looked at him then. Really looked. The kind that landed somewhere behind the sternum and stayed there. "Don't do that," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Say things like that. Like you actually—" She stopped. "Like I actually what?" The city hummed below them. Somewhere a siren moved through the streets and faded. Sloane looked down at her glass and then back up at him, and whatever wall she'd been maintaining since the moment he reached her in that corridor, since 2 years ago probably, if he was being honest, he watched it come down. "This is a terrible idea," she said. "I know. Riker would. I know. And you have the cup run, and I'm in Calgary, and this is genuinely Sloane. He said her name like a period at the end of a sentence. She looked at him. I know, he said again. Softer. I know all of it. Tell me to go back to the hotel and I will. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. 4, 5. Then she said, I didn't say go back to the hotel. She was gone before sunrise. Just a faint trace of her perfume on the pillow beside him, and her championship wristband left on the nightstand. The kind of leaving that happens fast, before the room gets bright enough to make decisions feel real. Caden lay still for a long time. Winnipeg was waking up outside. He could hear it, delivery trucks, early traffic, a city completely indifferent to the fact that he had just done the one thing he'd promised himself he would never do. His phone lit up on the nightstand. Riker, where'd you disappear to bro team breakfast 9 a.m.? Don't be late. He put the phone face down and stared at the ceiling until the light changed. 6 weeks. He counted them. Not obsessively. Just the way you count the days since something happened that you can't stop thinking about. Sloane had texted once, the morning after, a single line. I'm fine. Please don't make this weird. He had responded. Okay. And then nothing. 6 weeks of nothing, which should have felt like resolution, and instead felt like a bruise he kept accidentally pressing. He was in the middle of resistance training at the Arrows facility. Cables, 45 degrees, Hendricks yelling something obnoxious in the background, when his phone lit up on the bench with her name. He dropped the cable handle faster than he should have. Stepped outside into October air that hit like a wall. Hey, he said. Silence. The weighted kind. Sloane. I took 4 tests. Her voice was steady. Sloane Beckett delivered hard things in a steady voice. It was one of the first things he'd ever noticed about her, and right now it was the most terrifying thing he'd ever heard. I'm pregnant, Caden. The parking lot went completely still. The wind off the Red River hit the back of his neck. Somewhere a door slammed in the facility behind him, and he didn't move. Okay, he said. His voice came from somewhere calm and automatic, while everything underneath it went into freefall. Okay. Are you home? Calgary. Yes. I'll be there tomorrow. You have practice. I'll figure out practice. He pressed his palm flat against the cold brick wall and felt the solidity of it, something real to push against. Sloane. Look at me. I mean, I know I can't actually. I know what you mean. And then, very quietly, almost despite herself, okay. He stood in that parking lot for a long time after she hung up, hands still flat against the brick, watching the sky above Winnipeg go a particular shade of gray that felt appropriate. He drove to Calgary and back in 48 hours. He held her hand in the doctor's office, at her permission carefully like something borrowed, and watched the ultrasound screen with a feeling that had no name he knew yet, large and frightening and not entirely unwelcome in a way that scared him more than all the rest of it. Sloane sat up afterward with her jaw set and her eyes red but her voice completely level, and said, I need you to tell Riker before anyone else does. I know. He needs to hear it from you. Not from me trying to protect you. From you. I know, Sloane. She looked at him with those gray-green eyes in the fluorescent light of the medical office. He's going to be. I know what he's going to be. He met her gaze directly. I'll handle it. He told Riker on a Tuesday. Film room, after everyone else cleared out, the Nashville game frozen on the screen, a Hendricks turnover that had cost them the third period, fitting backdrop for a conversation about consequences. Shut the door, Caden said, when Riker appeared in the frame. Riker shut the door. Looked at him with the flat, still expression that wingers on opposing teams spent entire pre-game meetings trying to decode. I need you to let me say the whole thing, Caden said, before you react. That is, Riker said slowly, the worst opening to a conversation I have ever heard. Yeah. Caden held his gaze. It's Sloane. The room temperature changed. Riker went completely still in the way that was actually the opposite of stillness, the way of something coiling. Caden watched him process it, saw the exact moment the timeline rearranged itself behind his captain's eyes, Saw him locate the night of the championship celebration and understand what had happened in the space where he hadn't been paying attention. How long? Not a question. A blade. One night. Conference championship. He kept his voice even. I know exactly what this looks like, and I'm not going to tell you it doesn't look like that. Riker stood up. The chair scraped back hard against the floor, and in the silence of the empty room it sounded like a starting gun. You were in that room with her. His voice had gone very quiet, which was worse than loud. Much worse. I trusted you in that room. She's my... He stopped. Pressed both fists against the film table. Is she okay? And there it was. The thing that cracked Caden open a little, that through all of it, through the betrayal and the rage building visibly behind Riker's eyes, his first question was whether his sister was okay. She's scared, Caden said. She's handling it like Sloane handles everything, which means she's running 3 steps ahead of her feelings and pretending she has a plan. Something moved across Riker's jaw. A recognition. If you hurt her, he said quietly, and I mean in any way, any capacity, I will make sure you never play in this league again. I don't care about our contract. I don't care about the cup. His eyes were steady and completely serious. Are we clear? Crystal, do you have feelings for her? The question landed like a challenge, flat and direct. Or was this just... Yes, Caden said. No pause. No hedging. Riker held his gaze for a long, unreadable moment. I need a week, he said finally. Take whatever you need, Ree. He picked up his playbook from the table, moved to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame, his back to Caden, and said without turning, Team skate at 6 tomorrow. Be there. He walked out. Caden sat alone in the film room with the Nashville game still frozen on the screen and felt something that was not quite relief and not quite dread but somewhere in the complicated geography between the two. The headlines trending were like this. Arrows Wolfe spotted in Calgary. Trade talks or personal drama. Source. Tension between Beckett and Wolfe as Cup run begins. NHL Insider Report. Is Caden Wolfe a distraction the Arrows can't afford? The media found the thread, the way media always did, and pulled it with both hands. Nobody had confirmed anything specific. It didn't matter. Speculation in a hockey market was its own weather system. Coach Briggs called him in on a Wednesday morning with the expression of a man doing math he didn't want to do. Door, Briggs said. Caden closed it. I'm not asking for details. Briggs laced his fingers together on the desk. The desk that had a photo of his wife and 3 daughters on the left corner, which Caden found himself noticing. What I need from you is your head in this building when you are in this building. Can you give me that? Yes, sir. The front office is nervous. Nervous front offices make decisions that are bad for everyone. He leaned forward, voice dropping. You are one of the 2 or 3 best power forwards this franchise has had since the 90s. I will not watch them move you because of noise. So make sure it stays noise. Understood. And Wolfe. Briggs looked at him over his reading glasses with something that might, in different light, have been something close to paternal. Whatever you've got going on, handle it right. The right way. Already started, Caden said. She opened her door on a Friday night with the particular expression of someone who had been rehearsing being fine and wasn't sure the rehearsal had stuck. She was showing now. The curve of her pregnancy visible under an oversized flame sweatshirt. She'd worn that deliberately, he suspected, the same way she did most things deliberately, and her auburn hair was pulled over one shoulder, and there were shadows under her gray-green eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. She looked at the bags in his hands. You didn't have to bring food. You're not eating enough. Kira told me. Her eyes narrowed. Kira is a security risk. Kira cares about you. Kira needs to find a hobby. But she stepped back and let him in, which was the thing about Sloane. The gap between what she said and what she did was where the truth lived. He moved around her kitchen like he knew it, which he didn't, but somehow the geography of it felt intuitive in the way that certain spaces do when you belong in them. She curled into the corner of her couch. Cream cushions, one throw blanket she'd clearly been living under, a half-read book face down on the armrest, and watched him with her knees pulled up as much as her stomach allowed. "I've been thinking," she said. "Okay." He kept his back to her, giving her space to say it. "You don't have to be here. I mean that without bitterness. I have a career, a plan, I've run the numbers on maternity leave, I have Kira nearby, I have." "Sloane." He set down what he was holding and turned around. "Stop. I'm being practical. You're being armored." He walked into the living room and sat on the coffee table directly in front of her. Eye level, close, nowhere to redirect. "There's a difference." She looked at him. That full, reading look, the one that went past the surface and took inventory. "Why are you here?" she said. Quiet. Real. "Because I have been trying to talk myself out of being in love with you for 2 years. He held her gaze steady. "And I'm done." The apartment went very still. "You can't just say that," she breathed. "I just said it." Caden, his name in her mouth like something she was deciding whether to hold on to. "I'm not asking you to solve everything tonight." His voice dropped. "I'm not asking you to trust something that started messy or feel something you don't feel. I'm just telling you the truth because you have always deserved the truth from me and I owe you that whether anything comes from it or not." She looked away. Out the window where Calgary's lights pressed against the dark. Back to him. "Riker called me," she said finally. "I figured." He yelled at me for 11 minutes straight. The ghost of something moved across her face. Then he asked if I needed money. Then he yelled for 4 more minutes. Then he told me he loved me and hung up before I could respond. "That's very Riker." "Yes." She looked down at her hands, one of them resting now, unconsciously, against her stomach. "He's going to be insufferable about this for years. Probably forever. He'll tell this baby the story at every Christmas. Every Christmas, every birthday, probably the wedding." She looked up at him sharply. He held her gaze without backing down. "Ask me," she said quietly, "when this is over. When the cup is done and the noise dies down and it's just real. Ask me then." "Okay." "And Caden." Her gray-green eyes held his with an intensity that went straight through him. "Don't you dare lose the Stanley Cup over this. I will not be that story." He laughed. Genuinely, completely, for the first time in weeks, it came out of him like pressure releasing. "No pressure," he managed. "Absolutely none," she said. And that left corner of her mouth curved, traitorous and perfect, and he had to physically remind himself that he had said he would wait. He waited. The series was tied 3-3 when everything broke open. Tampa Bay had evened it in a brutal 6th game that went to triple overtime and left the entire Arrows roster looking like men who had survived something and weren't sure what. Caden had a bruised rib from a hit in the 3rd period that Briggs didn't know about and that the medical team had been explicitly instructed not to document. He was taping his stick in the tunnel beneath the arena, 40 minutes before warm-ups, when he heard Riker's voice behind him. "She's here." "Sloane." He went still. Riker's voice was flat, unreadable. "She drove from Calgary. Didn't tell me until an hour ago." A pause. "Caden." He turned. Riker was looking at him with an expression he'd never seen on his captain's face before. Not rage, not the cold warning from the film room. Something more complicated. Something that looked like a man updating his understanding of a situation in real time. "She drove 4 hours, Riker said. 7 months pregnant. In October." He held Caden's gaze. "Just thought you should know." He walked back down the tunnel toward the locker room. Caden stood alone in the concrete corridor with his half-taped stick and a bruised rib and the specific, terrifying knowledge that he was about to play the most important hockey game of his life. He found her at intermission after the 2nd period, tied 1-1, Tampa pressing hard, the ice feeling like it was tilting, in the corridor near the medical suite where she'd been credentialed. She was standing against the wall in that cream coat, both hands against her stomach, and the arena noise was a wall of sound around them and none of it existed. "You drove 4 hours, he said. "I'm aware of the distance, yes." "Sloane." "Don't." She looked up at him with wet eyes she was absolutely refusing to let spill. "Don't make it a thing." I just needed to. She stopped. Her jaw worked. I needed to be here. Okay. I needed to see you on that ice. He stood in front of her in his jersey, still damp from the second period, ribs screaming where no one could see it, and understood something completely. I'm going to win this game, he said. I know. And then I'm going to come find you. Her breath caught. Caden. Not asking you for anything tonight, he said. I told you I'd ask when it was real. This is real. He glanced toward the ice. Back to her. But I need you to know that before I go back out there. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached up, just briefly, just with her fingertips, and pressed her hand flat against his chest, directly over the bruised rib she somehow knew about without him saying a word. The physiotherapist in her, probably. The Sloane in her, definitely. Go, she said softly. He went. 40 seconds left. Tampa pressing for the tying goal. Caden Wolfe at center ice, breathing hard, ribs screaming. And then Sloane walked through the gate. She hadn't planned it, she said that later, and he believed her, because Sloane didn't do dramatic gestures, which was exactly why this one hit the entire arena like a current. She'd been watching from the tunnel, and the door to the ice had been open, and she just walked through it. 7 months pregnant, cream coat, one hand on her stomach, standing at center ice while the clock ticked and 40,000 people stopped breathing. Caden saw her immediately. He always did. The referee had frozen the play, some confusion with a delayed penalty, and in that pocket of stop time she looked at him from 30 feet away and said 3 words. He couldn't hear them. He didn't need to. It's happening now. He was off the ice in 30 seconds. Riker, to his credit and without being asked, took the final face-off himself and then skated directly to the bench and said something to Coach Briggs that no one except Briggs ever heard, and Briggs looked at the ice and back at Riker and nodded once. Caden was in the corridor when the buzzer went. 1-1. He didn't hear it. Sloane's hand was in his and they were already moving. Winnipeg. Home ice. Every seat filled. The whole country watching. Caden Wolfe scored the Stanley Cup winning goal at 7:42 of the first overtime period. A wrist shot from the left circle, clean and hard and unretrievable. He said afterward he wasn't thinking about anything when he released it. Just the ice. Just clarity. Riker Beckett lifted the cup first. Skated the full lap, face split open with something too large for expression. Then he skated directly to Caden, not the next player in the traditional line, not the assistant captain, not the veterans. Directly to Caden, in front of the entire arena and a national broadcast, and placed the Stanley Cup in his hands. The hockey world spent a week analyzing what that meant. It meant one thing. He found her on the ice in the chaos. She'd been credentialed through the medical staff, and she was crying, which she would deny completely and consistently for the rest of their lives. You didn't lose it, she said, when he reached her. Told you. You absolute. She laughed through whatever she was refusing to call tears. He put one hand against her face, tilting it up, thumb at her jaw. The ice and the noise and the falling confetti became purely decorative. I'm asking, he said. I know. Sloane Beckett. His voice dropped low, just for her. I have been in love with you since the day I met you, and I have exactly zero interest in pretending otherwise for one more second of my life. She looked at him with those gray-green eyes full of everything she didn't say easily and said, that was the worst timeline for falling in love with someone. Historically catastrophic, he agreed. You couldn't have done this a normal way. Not even slightly. It's so messy, Caden. The best things are. She searched his face for a moment longer. That reading look, the one that went all the way down. Then she grabbed the front of his jersey, pulled him to her, and kissed him in the center of the ice while confetti rained over Winnipeg and the Stanley Cup sat 3 feet away and Riker Beckett skated a wide, deliberate arc around them with his eyes pointed somewhere else entirely. Which was, for Riker, the loudest possible blessing. Outside the arena, the city erupted. Inside it, 40,000 people celebrated a championship. And in the center of all of it, on a sheet of ice under a cascade of gold and white, something messy and badly timed and completely inevitable finally became exactly what it had always been trying to be. Real.